All right. Well, very honored here today to present two of the stars of the film here, the two main stars here. First up, he's an Emmy-winning, Tony-winning, Oscar-nominated, just about everything you can think of, actor in so many great things, and terrific here is Frank Tassone. Please welcome Hugh Jackman.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And she is, talk about Emmy winning. I think you got about 7 of them, and an Oscar and so many other things. Please welcome Allison Janney.
Hi, Pete.
Hi.
You.
Hey, Allison.
So great to see you both here virtually from your respective locations. And thanks for joining us to talk about this film, which I mentioned in my introduction. I actually was invited by the producer, Fred Berger, to see it before it went to the Toronto Film Festival over at CAA. I didn't know what I was seeing, except basically that you guys were in it. And I was blown away by this movie. It's such an amazing story. It's almost like, how did this ever happen? And now it went to HBO. I thought originally it was going to go theatrically in theaters, and then HBO snapped it up for, I think, a record price. And it's allowed so many people to see it now, which I think is a great thing. Hugh, can you talk about why you were initially attracted to the idea of playing this guy, which is a true life story and a real character? He's still living, so there's a lot of pressure, I think, added on to that.
Yeah, there is. Particularly when you're portraying the worst probably time in a person's life, you know. And Frank was was the best superintendent in the country. He was the highest paid. He'd taken the Roslyn School to number 4 and it was well on its way to becoming #1 school in the country. And then yet he was part of this scandal, which was the biggest theft of public money or public school money in American history. And so I was really intrigued by the story, which I didn't know of. It happened. I was probably in Australia when it happened, but more importantly, how something like that can happen. How good people doing good things, careers in public service and education, can somehow find themselves slipping into a lifestyle or a belief that somehow this is okay. Then how it unfolded itself was extraordinary. But going back to your first question, Corey Finley, the director, I saw his movie Thoroughbreds, and I think I was 20 minutes into watching that movie. I'd read the script, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do this movie. Because it's not an easy, on the page, I couldn't quite work out what the tone of the movie was. It seemed to straddle 2 or 3 different genres, and I thought, oh, this is going to be difficult. And when I saw Thoroughbreds, I was like, I'm in. So Corey had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because this movie, Bad Education, has a lot of different tones. The whole thing could fall like a souffle if not done perfectly. And to match that, it's dark comedy at many different places, even though you're dealing with such a horrific kind of serious subject matter here.
Yeah, it is. Well, the bare facts of the story are kind of unbelievable. Like it seems like even way too crazy to be true. So I think that tone really supports that. And it also keeps the story going. A lot of people are going to go in knowing it's about theft of public school money, but I guarantee you're going to not know how this thing unfolds once it starts. And I think that was why Corey decided to really go for that tone. And I think it works very powerfully.
Yeah. Allison, what about you in playing Pam? To me, she's such a morally conflicted and fascinating character. You wonder how she got sucked into doing this, and it sort of overtook, and her reasons for it. I'm wondering, you approaching it as an actor, what you looked for in playing her, and also, the level of research you did, and she obviously is around too.
Yes, there are a lot of parts to that question, and I will try to answer them all. I read the script at first, which I thought didn't sound like it would be as unbelievably thrilling as it turned out to be, and quite a page turner. And when you're playing someone who is a real life character, and I've had the opportunity to do that twice in my career. But I've never gotten to actually meet with the actual person, and I didn't get to meet Pam Gluckin or find out from her point of view why she did what she did. So as an actor, you just approach it like there's so much public record on both Pam and Frank, and we had a wonderful researcher, Amy Hammond, who gave me a stack this big of information on everything that Pam did, everything she stole, all the houses she had and what she owned, and the artwork that she bought with it. There's so much, but when you're putting together a character, you have to figure out, you have to imagine why they, first of all, you can't judge them. You have to figure out why they did what they did. And I imagine someone like Pam, who worked so hard to get where she was as the assistant superintendent of business, that she, she started out as a bus driver and worked her way up. And it became evident to me in the script, looking at Mike Makowski's script, that it was important to her that she be a provider. And she got a lot of pride out of making sure her family never had to want for anything. And so I thought, it might be, I decided for myself that it must have been some financial squeeze or pressure that she was under, or something that would have brought shame to her family. And so she took money, maybe intending absolutely to pay it back, but then realized that no one noticed, because she was basically writing the checks and reconciling them at the end of the month. So I think I have to believe my version of Pam, she intended to pay it back, but also there was a sense of entitlement, I think, that she began to have, that she deserved these extra things, because she was representing the school, and because of Frank and Pam, and the community was, more people were moving in. It was bringing a lot of money into the area, and so maybe they thought they should have some. It's such an interesting. I love playing morally complex characters. I think they're fascinating to figure out, because they have to wake up every day and feel good about themselves. So I think they tell themselves something quite different than what they're actually doing is crossing ethical boundaries and doing very bad things, but they're somehow justifying it. And I wish that we'd gotten to have that scene that Hugh and our characters had gotten to, but it was wonderful to get to. I love. How is that for an answer?
That was right, actually.
It's a great answer. I'm wondering. So the other character you referenced that you played, a real life character, was Tonya Harding's mother.
Yes,
and that resulted in an Oscar. So, and every other award, but you had no opportunity to meet her. You couldn't find her, I think, right?
No, Tonya didn't know she was alive or dead, nor did she care. So everything that I had about that woman was through Tanya's lens of her mother's, her experience of her mother. But I also had to know that, there had to be her mother's side too, which was wonderful to get to do that direct address to the camera and explain her side, which was really fun. You usually don't get to do that with your characters, is look into the camera and say, okay, look, this is what really happened. And I didn't get to do that as Pam. And she didn't, looking at all the information on her, she didn't speak out about what she did. There's nothing, she didn't say anything about what she did. And I really wish that I had gotten to know that. And I, of course, afterwards we find out that Tanya's mother is still alive. So I wonder what I don't know what she thought of my performance of her. She probably didn't enjoy it. I don't know. but I don't know. Hugh, what do you?
Yeah, talk about Frank here, and and I don't know if he's had a reaction to this that he shared with you, or that has gotten back to you or anything. But it's interesting once it's out there, and the real people have the opportunity to see this.
Yeah, he has done a couple of things on a podcast. I can't remember the guy's name, Mike the Coach, I think. He's like a life coach. And so he had Frank on in anticipation of the movie. And then after the movie aired, he had him back on again. And I found it very touching to listen to Frank. I didn't meet Frank. And I'm so glad you mentioned Amy Hammond, Amy Stevens. Amy is a researcher I met on Les Mis through Anne Hathaway. And I've used her on every movie I've done. And she had, as Allison said, we had books, we had hours of video, and there was a lot on the public record. Frank was a very public person. He wrote op-ed pieces every week or every fortnight in the local paper. He did many, many interviews. He was Rotary's Man of the Year, so he was really out there. And of course, there's the case itself. So there was a lot to go on. Frank is, he talked about it actually in this podcast, a perfectionist. He was a perfectionist. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be the best. He had to be number one. So he had this massive amount of pressure on himself. And then he even speaks kind of in disbelief and with a lot of pain, emotional pain as he speaks, of doing this thing. He can't quite justify how he sees himself could have done such a thing. It was also, I think, as Allison was saying, it's so complex. All of us, literally everyone listening to this, you and I, Pete, Allison, sometimes in our lives we do things we go, that's not me, that wasn't me. Or you can look back and go, how did I do that? Like, you know, we all have these anomalies. We all have these things. I think as an actor, what Allison was saying, I totally agree. That's what's fascinating. How can humans pretend that things are okay just because it suits them personally? And so for Frank, you had this perfectionist, this ambition, got to be number one, had to be seen as amazing and perfect to everyone, mixed with a kind of entitlement that came with extreme success. And people all around them getting very, very rich, you know, all the realtors, all the people in the town getting very rich off their hard work, you know. So
yeah, I love that little scene where you get rewarded for bringing the school to number 4 on the way to number 1, and you see all the gold watches and the expensive shoes and the leather, and then they give you a box of chocolates and
keep up the good work.
Yeah, and it just you know, you just saw that sort of disappointment, like, wow, that's the thanks I get.
Frank said, you know, like, he actually recounted the first time he went to Pam, and this is sort of in the script. It was there certainly in the research. It was a $300 check, I think. He said, I'm going to pay back from a personal check something I spend on a Vegas conference. And Pam said, please, Frank, you work 14 hours a day. Don't worry about it. You deserve it. And you kind of, I get it. Like, seems okay. And he said it started with something so small, and within 12 years, it amassed an amount of 12 million.
It's amazing how these things just careen out of control. But, you know, when we're seeing with this, and I saw this movie before this college scandal started here too, but there's elements of that kind of society, that kind of town, that kind of expectation. And, you know, I deserve this any which way I can get it, that come through, that we've seen play out in real life in a different way. But nevertheless, it certainly exists.
Yeah, that was going down while we were shooting. Do you remember, Allison? That was all happening.
Absolutely. And it definitely it parallels this of people feeling needing that, wanting that privilege and power and control, and doing anything to get it, being blinded by that need for that. Whether it be getting your kid into the right school or having the things that you think, the socioeconomic differences and disparities that were evident in Pam and Frank's lives, as opposed to the parents at the school. And so there's always socioeconomic differences that play a big part in things like scandals like this and embezzling.
Where did you shoot this? Where was it shot, location wise?
On Long Island.
So you did it where it happened, basically.
Pretty much around that area.
Yeah.
You have to nail those Long Island accents. It looked pretty well, huh?
Yeah, I mean, Allison, I guess you don't work with it. I just know that you don't work with a dialect coach. That's just natural to you, right? You're so good with them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. No, I didn't. Your guy helped. I mean, I worked with Liz Himmelstein, but who's yours again?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have Liz. Jess Platt, my guy.
And he helped on the set because Liz wasn't with me while I shot, but she helped me in LA, and then I came there and Jess helped me just remind me of things. And I spent a lot of time on Long Island, Pete, with my grandparents growing up in the Five Town area. So I Five Towns area, I knew the accent in my youth, and used to love to speak with the Long Island accent back as a kid. Yeah. So it was kind of fun to jump back.
I forgot you were with Liz. That's heartening to me, actually.
Yeah.
People, like, it's just heartening to me. There's some of that, like, I hold you up there. Allison is one of the best actors I've ever worked with, but it's just always a good reminder when people say to me, what does it take? And I go, oh, okay, well, Allison has a dialect coach. And she knows that area well. I mean, I've used a dialect coach for every film. Jess Platt, thank God for him. So
I love dialects. I love those kinds of things. They're so they allow you to they're so transformative and really just help you feel like you are not Hugh Jackman or Allison Janney or somebody else. It's just it's fun to have those tricks.
Now, Hugh just said you're one of the best he's ever worked with. And Allison, I read recently or somewhere that you can't wait to work with Hugh again. You're already looking for another project.
Well, it definitely made me want more, because he was exactly everything and more that I hoped he would be in terms of that, an actor's actor, someone who is there with you, who listens and answers and is playful and is collaborative and everything you. And he also happens to be the right size for me. So I really want to stand on a Broadway stage and go toe to toe with Hugh Jackman. That's
just checking. This is recorded. This is recorded, right?
We have
more films too. Films are okay too. I just I know we both started out in the theater, so I felt like that's.
When we had our read through the table, a lot of the actors, you probably know them, are Broadway veterans, and there were even a couple at our read through who were not in the movie itself but were filling in for others. And as Allison came in, I just saw you go, oh, like literally each person was from a different Broadway show you had been in.
I never felt like it was like, this is your life, because it was like, oh my God. Stephen Spinella, Kathy Curtin, all these people that I Welker White, who played, Hugh's secretary and his assistant, who's just so many wonderful actors from all of my years in New York in the theater. It was really wonderful to see a group of New York actors assembled.
Stephanie Kurtzuba, who was on stage with me in The Boy from Oz. It was seeing her that day. It was so good.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Ray Romano was terrific in this too.
Isn't he? Yeah. Ray added that he's just hysterical, and so I loved the way he played this role, Bob Spicer.
He's so good and so lovely to be around. And I remember we were sitting in a parking lot on one of the Long Island parking lots where we were shooting, and there was a gas station on the other side and a comedy store next to it. Like, it was a very random thing. And he was like, yep, I used to play there every Monday night. That's where I got my start. He was awesome. We had an amazing cast. Geraldine, who I thought was incredible. An Australian girl.
Yes. It's so great to have this kind of ensemble cast, every one of them. In terms of this movie, it was independently made. And Hugh, I know you do these big studio films a lot as well, but do you like working on that kind of a scrappy or indie production that you don't know where it's going to wind up? You're just making it and then putting it out in the world. This is a
I'm Australian, and I started off doing films in Australia where everything is scrappy and feels independent, and you literally are on the other side of the world with no one watching. And it's kind of, I think, a great way to make films. I've learned over the years, even when you do the big studio movies, when there's less people fighting harder, it tends to work better. When you fall into the committee mentality and there's too many people second guessing each other, things tend to either get bland or they just go off track. And Fred Berger, Eddie, we just had amazing producers on this that were there every day, every single day on set and fighting. And Corey, it just felt like we had a really strong, very, very committed team. Mike Mikowski, Alison mentioned, wrote the script, who went to the school. It all felt very personal, it really mattered a lot to everybody. And I think that's usually where the best stuff comes out.
Yeah. It's interesting. Of course, Allison, you've done a lot of indie films as well, and used to this, but sometimes the gems come out that way. I wish the Hollywood studios were back doing some more challenging material too. They do one or two a year, but mostly this is up to these independent producers and people to find these scripts and these stories and somehow bring them to life. It's not easy getting a movie made these days.
No, and who knows going forward what it will look like. That's all new territory we're heading into. I hope that we do continue to make interesting films like this, and that we'll get to see them in movie theaters as well.
I'm wondering about us. Yeah, go ahead, Hugh. Go ahead.
No, you just said at the beginning about how the story of this film, which was intended for theatrical release as we were making it. And
Yeah.
I think as it turned out, not just because of COVID, but just regardless, the fact that it's gone to streaming and it has been seen by a lot of people, I think is the way of the world. And I'm kind of glad that a lot of people got to see it. And I have no idea, regardless of COVID, what would have happened theatrically. But my guess is not nearly as many people would have seen it. So it seems to be there's a lot of great quality happening on TV. There's a lot of risks being made in TV in the last 5-10 years. And but I still do hope that, as you said, Pete, that there is room in the cinema for some of this kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask you, there's so many great scenes in this, but there's one, maybe you couldn't do it if you were shooting it today with all that's going on after COVID, but that sandwich scene where you
yeah.
I'm so glad
you would have smacked that sandwich out of my hand. It was like,
you would have held it up with gloves on your hand, like
exactly. That was our first scene we shot.
Yeah. It was the first scene we got to shoot, and I was so excited. I'd already been shooting for a couple of weeks, I think, because you were still doing your series or something. But so it was, for me, I'm always a little nervous the first couple of days of it, but I was sort of already in the flow. And it was one of those things where, Allison's in today. This is like a dream come true. And it just, whatever expectations I had, it just was miles above. I don't know if we said many of the lines that were scripted for Mike Mikowski. But we just had so much fun. And actually Corey was like, I think I just need one camera on the two of you. I'm not sure I'm going to mix this up too much, because we were just playing and having a blast. I just felt so comfortable. Allison made me feel so comfortable being with her, and I don't know.
It was my first day. He had been filming, like I said, and I get very nervous first day of school kind of thing, and I was very intimidated because so in love with Hugh and his work, and have admired him for years and wanted to work with him. So I was very nervous. I stumbled over, a few of my lines in the beginning, which a lot of people who know me know that's not like me, because I'm known for knowing my lines and spitting them out. But I was a little tongue tied, but I got my rhythm going, and then just
I don't remember that.
When I knew, I do. I was like, we always so hard on ourselves, but he was so fun, and I had so much fun playing with him with that sandwich beat, and was glad that Corey let us just have fun and be playful, because I knew that was establishing the relationships that these two people had. We had that one scene to show that these are two people that like each other, respect each other, have fun, they're on the same team, and it was an important scene to.
Yeah, it's one of the really complex things about this story. Sorry, Pete, if I keep barging in.
Keep that
these two were so close, and I think Frank, who had many secrets in his life and kept a lot of stuff hidden below the surface, probably revealed more of them to Pam than anyone. They had that kind of relationship, and yet all of this went on without seemingly them ever kind of talking about it. It was never really outwardly spoken. And that's one of the things that fascinated me both. People are sort of aware, but I'm not going to talk about it. And how that developed without them being literally in cahoots was just incredible to me.
Yeah, the whole thing. It's fascinating. You mentioned his secrets, and that is an aspect of the story, I think, as people see the film, it surprises them in such a way to see, here's this guy who's one thing, and then in the second half of the film is revealed his whole gay lifestyle and what happens to him there. I'm wondering about playing that in that character and how you approach that, Hugh.
Yeah, well, there were so many aspects, from sexuality to the different relationships he had to, I understand that. Frank actually spoke about that when he went for his first interview for it was like an assistant superintendent. And the guy said to him, he said, I wouldn't mention your sexuality in the interview. And so he didn't. And he got that message, I don't know when that was, probably early 80s, late 70s, that's probably not going to help. So I understand why he did, but someone who is so invested in what other people think of them, and when their own personal standards are perfection, everything's got to be perfect all the time. The suit, the shirt, the hair, the face, the attitude, the work, all the time, perfection, always on, 15 hours a day. What are they covering? Like, what is inside that makes them feel they have to be perfect all the time? That is what really draws me in, I think, as an actor, because you want conflict. You want things underneath the surface to be different than what's on the surface. That's where the fun is.
Yeah.
And in terms of handling it, I think I always believe, Jerry Sachs taught me this, everyone in life and every character is always fighting for the possibility of a happy ending at every moment. So every scene, everyone, every day, every interview, every moment, we're all wanting things to work out well, even when the evidence is stacking up against you. And I think that's what makes this movie work so well. Even when Frank is like, I can rescue this, I can save this, I can save myself, I can save it, until obviously in the end he can't. And so every scene I go in with that attitude, you want a good outcome. You want that scene to work well. You want things to work in your favor. And he was keeping so many balls in the air for such a long period of time. But I think I just try to keep the possibility of those balls staying in the air forever.
Yeah. It's an interesting approach that you have to have. Do you have to, both of you, do you have to have a certain empathy for a character when you go in, no matter what the backstory is and what people think about it, that you have to find a way to like them, or at least get to that point before you can play them?
I think you have your initial opinion, your personal opinion, and then you have to try not to judge your character. You can't judge them in order to play them accurately, I think. I mean, they may judge. I judge myself sometimes, I guess, of certain things I do, but I think it helps to try to, I like to humanize them by having some empathy for them and trying to understand why they did what they did. Not condoning it by any sort, but trying to understand it and empathize.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have to. I remember an acting teacher yelling at me for standing outside a character. I didn't fully understand what he meant, and it was sometime in second year where he goes, "That's it," and I understood when you're not judging, you can actually be in. There's no separation between you and that character, and you can portray the reasons why. Shakespeare the Great. Right? There's no point us just telling the story so that we can throw eggs and tar and feather certain characters. I mean, they were dragged through the tabloids for weeks, every day on the front pages. So the only reason to tell that story is to kind of humanize the situation, make it a cautionary tale, and make us all look perhaps at ourselves and areas of our life where we may do things that we may not be proud of. We all have, how do we move on from things that we may have done wrong? They don't all have to be illegal $12 million scams, but I think that's understanding why people do things. That's really probably why I got into acting in the first place.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I hope you both keep on acting and get that chance again here once we get beyond this whole time. And Hugh, I want to see you on Broadway doing Music Man, and I'm hoping that happens. Meanwhile, we have Bad Education, which is a terrific film. Congratulations to both of you on it. And thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys. Bye,
Thanks,
Allison, Pete. And thank you, team. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Hugh. I love you.
I love you too.
I love you too.